Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. In the last part we finished off our business up in Fireburg, and now it's time for us to head back here into the Focus Tower, because we got the next coin obviously, which means we can head on to the next section of the world map. And admittedly, out of the four main quadrants, I honestly think that the next section is my least favorite in terms of the storyline stuff we have to do on it. More on that later. However, this is a bit of an interesting part of that. Well, first off, hi, old guy. Hurry to Windia, but be on the lookout for Captain Mac's ship. Okay, you ever gonna speak more than 4 sentences in a row with me? This section is notable because it actually has a secondary staircase for us to go down. And this leads to a mass of foreshadowing that I'm going to elect to ignore talking about because, hey, look, there's an enemy in red chest right there. That's more important. And within this fight's actually our first new enemy in the game, the Shadow, 925 HP, 675 experience points, 21 gold. Weak to Blizzard. I think they can blind you, and I think they can also self-destruct if they get low enough on HP, in which case I think they'll just do their damage, their HP in damage. And I think they can also theoretically instant kill you with an ability known as Doom Dance. However, they rarely ever use it, so not really much to talk about there. But they do have a notable weakness that I haven't been able to talk about thus far because we haven't had the spell to do it. Shadows are also weak to Aero. Despite being the game that replaced Final Fantasy V, this is actually still the game that introduced Aero as its own separate spell and element, more or less. Though actually, I'm trying to remember, when was Aero first technically its own main element in this series? I want to say it was Final Fantasy V. That sounds right. If it wasn't 5, it was 6. But now that we have that, that's going to be a pretty powerful spell from here on. Oh. Gotcha! Step back, Benjamin, and leave this filthy monster to me. Really, we can do it together, but... Good job, dumbass! Either way, that does lead us into our next new encounter against the Mummy. 685 HP, 459 EXP, 15 gold. No real weaknesses of note, but it can, I believe, sleep, poison, and stone you? Which is a pretty nasty combination, the petrification in particular. Also, I should mention, me going down, this is actually automated. Ruben! I'm alright. Keep going and I'll catch up. Sure thing. I know that theme music. Well, that's awfully convenient. Your buddy fell, kid? Yeah, but he's okay. Alright, then I'll tag along with you for a bit. And as soon as one leaves, one joins. We got Tristan back. Cool. He is notably, I think this is like the one time in the game a character joins in off the top of my head and they're an outright weaker level than you. Tristan has not been doing much since we last parted with him, clearly. This is also a bit of a weird area because aside from that encounter with the Mummy, getting Tristan in 2 chests along the way, the rope bridge is entirely empty, enemy-wise. Maybe it gets more if you leave and re-enter. I've honestly never tried, but it's a bit odd, that. Either way, with that, we're actually already at the end of the area. Get this, the bridge is only as long as the bridge. But that does lead into the Alive Forest. Potentially one of my least favorite areas in the game, but not for the reason you'd think. It's actually a fairly short area. It also has our next new enemy, the Spectre, or Spector as it's actually for some reason written here. 690 HP, 453 experience points, 15 gold. Weak, resistant to Blizzard and Earth, but weak to both Wind and Shoot elementals, as well as the obvious cure. Think they can confuse you as well if you counter with a counter, but that's about it really. However, as with most other ghost enemies, they can still multiply, but at this point, as long as you're multi-targeting Aero with Benjamin after Tristan attacks whoever, you're probably going to kill a good amount of, or at least do a good amount of damage to everything that it doesn't really matter. Located within this forest, though, as you can see one on screen right now, are 3 large tree trunks, which have a crest on them. The matching crest is often found nearby beneath a standard tree you have to knock down with an axe. If you use the matching crest that's on the ground, you'll be teleported within said tree trunk, or at least the matching tree trunk rather, for better clearance. And you'll find a brown chest that has items in it. It's actually not that important at all that you do it. But I'm going to be showing off the ones that I have access to right now, at least. The Libra and Gemini crests. Admittedly, this area can be a bit tiring for one reason, and that is the fact that you're just constantly mashing the A button. I like the idea of you using your weapons in the field, but in the case of the axe, it gets repetitive and kind of finger-hurty after a bit. Admittedly, this area is also a bit interesting in how it's approached, in that, with the exception of going over the bridge at the that I went over about a minute ago, getting to the end is actually fairly non-linear. There's several side paths you can go along just to fight some enemies, get some other items, and though in one case you want to go get something because there's obviously a red chest in here. But otherwise, I actually like the design of this area. And in here we get the ultimate axe in the game, the Giant's Axe. This thing is amazing. 182 power, making it way stronger than even the Mega Grenade. More than likely, in this next little bit, you're going to be one-shotting a lot of enemies with this thing. Now, one thing I'm also thankful about this area, and a couple of the areas in this part admittedly, is that there's not as many enemies directly in a row with each other because, behind the scenes, the enemy encounters in the past few parts and editing them out has been killing my editing software something fierce. So you're the king of this forest, huh? Let us through. I don't think it likes you. How about Gailey? Can't you talk to trees? Yeah, she must be an aquarium by now. And what I mean by killing my editor, not so much during the editing, though it has made it crash once or twice, but I save constantly, so that's not much of an issue. I more mean in rendering, I have had to render each of the previous parts in separate pieces, and then put them all into one project file, and then render those together. Because otherwise, it just crashes all over the place. I'm assuming it's due to the amount of transitions I have, which even compared to some other RPGs I've played, there's a good amount in each part. But, yikes, it gets ridiculous. The only other time I had to do that for a video with that kind of editing setup was the top 10 I did a few years back, and that's just been annoying. I really hope I don't have to continue doing it, but if I have to, oh well. Hey, there's Kaylee, right over here in Phoebe's house. Kaylee's sleeping. Why don't you go talk to Grandpa until she wakes up? Okay, guess we're heading down to Spencer's place then. Just gonna cut that out for you because, let's be real, you know where it is. It's a pretty tedious trek. How's the tunnel going? Can you save Captain Mac in his ship? I can't dig a tunnel that far. We need Otto's help. He's in Windia. By the way, who's that with you? Tristam at your service. I'm a treasure hunter. You don't say. Listen, I recently heard a rumor about some amazing armor. Let's go. Sorry, Benjamin. I'm going treasure hunting with him. Later. And shortest time that we've had a companion since Kaylee first left is you. Tristam! Spencer! I almost forgot. I'll give you this dragon claw. Don't worry, it's on me. Bye. And we get the claw he got back in the bone dungeon. Cool. More on that in a moment. Hi, Phoebe. Grandpa just won't slow down. Well, maybe I'll use a bomb to get rid of this dirt. Phoebe, you shouldn't fiddle with that. Oh, God. You seem to be running pretty quickly. I wish I had a run button about now. The tunnel collapsed. I have to tell Grandpa. Take care of Kaylee for me. And I believe now that chest back there, I forget what it contained, I think heal potions, is now completely inaccessible. On to the topic at hand, though, now we have the Dragon Claw. While it still allows us to climb onto walls, it also has a bit of a functionality of the hookshot from Zelda, in that you can hook on over to things. It has some decent attack power, and it can inflict damn near every status element in the game, so that's pretty good. The most important one, though, is probably Petrify, though. The instant death is nice, but Petrification, you're much more likely to kill something with. So now let's actually just use a quick exit spell to get back here more quickly, and let's go talk to Kaylee. I haven't seen you with good consistency since, like, what, part 1? Kaylee, you're well. Yeah, but did you hear about my dad? Yeah, Spencer told me. He said I should see Otto and Windia, and I was hoping you'd come too. And Kaylee has gotten a good buff since last time. She's even got a giant axe. Hot diggity damn. Armor-wise, I don't think she's changed that much. She's obviously gotten upgrades that would be, you know, helpful. But otherwise, resistance from silence, petrification, ice, nothing too spectacular. I think that's actually the exact same setup she had, weakness-wise, resistance-wise, that she had back when. And I'm just going to cut back here to save you some time. Oh, great tree spirit of the forest, please let us through to Windia. I'll let you through if you can whack the monsters inside of me. If that's the way you want it. Okay. Hello there, great Deku Tree. How are you? Haven't played Ocarina of Time in a few years. It's nice to see you again. This is a bit of a lengthy dungeon, though, I have to admit. And it contains our next two enemies, Live Oaks and Snippions. Live Oaks have 710 HP, 447 experience points, 15 gold, weak to fire, as you would expect, as well as axe-type attacks. I think they might be able to lower your magic, but that's about it. They might be able to poison you, too, now that I think about it. Whereas Snippions have 690 HP, 459 experience points, 18 gold, weak to fire, and that's about it. I think they can poison you as well, but you're going to be getting poisoned a lot here anyway, so it's not really that major. This is probably the point in the game where you really don't have to worry about using your healed spell charges. You probably have more than enough at this point. Though they also give you a good amount of, like, heal potions and cure potions throughout here all the same. A bit redundant, I admit, because I kind of wish they replaced some of these heal and cure potion chests with seed chests, just because seeds are so much rarer to find in chests throughout the game. I think so far we've maybe found a total of 3 chests that contain them, and that's just plain ridiculous. But yeah, the Dragon Claw allows us to basically hookshot from area to area, and I admit it's always cool to have an ability like this. Nothing's probably ever going to beat the first time you use the hookshot in any of the 3D Zelda games, though, because that's just an exhilarating trip the first time through. No Link to the Past, I love you, but your hookshot was kind of bland, admittedly. Same with TU and Link's Awakening. That's just because that's one of those things that I think works better in 3D than 2D, because the spatial stuff that happens with your brain. I think the Live Oak might have the second highest amount of floors out of any dungeon in the game. It definitely has some of the most amount of rooms within it, but a lot of them are fairly small. And this one contains the next new enemy, the Mad Toad. 740 HP, 480 experience points, 18 gold, weak to Blizzard, so use that. I think this one can do a lot of stats simultaneously, like Petrify, Poison. I think it can poison you through counter or just standard attack. I think they might also be able to paralyze you, but don't quote me on that. But because of this, I do have to mention that even though a lot of these are obviously just resprites of early game enemies, something I have to give the end game compared to the early game is that I think the enemy variety is better per dungeon. Just because you, especially in Windia, you don't fight as many enemy varieties in the battlefields around as you do in the dungeons. And that's the big issue of the early game areas, even through Fireburg, in that you fight a lot of the enemies in battlefields, and thus makes some of the areas feel like a bit of copy-paste in that regard. But we do have our next new enemy, the Leech. 745 HP, 504 experience points, 18 gold, resistant to fire but weak to earth and wind, as well as I think the axe. And I think it can poison you, so I think a lot of enemies can poison you in this area if it's not entirely obvious. Mind you, I think poison might just be the most common status ailment in this game, just because, let's be real, every good RPG has a poison status ailment to some extent. How useful it is on you compared to the enemies, though, is how it determines how good it actually is. I'm trying to think of what's the most use I've ever gotten out of a poison type ability. Probably some of the Final Fantasy mainline games come to mind, particularly like 9. I think I got some good use out of poison in 10. And Octopath Traveler, actually, I got some good use out of Therion's poison ability. Just because of how the damage formula for that works, more or less. I still need to finish that game, though. I've finished all 8 characters, but I'm working on some post-gamey stuff. And here we get Meteor. Kind of strange that would be, you know, in a tree, but okay. It's our next wizard-type spell, and it's quite the powerful spell. Party targeting as usual for basically all of the wizard spells that aren't thunder. Does good damage, however notable, it isn't non-elemental like Meteor has been in some other Final Fantasies. In this, it is decisively Earth Elemental. A bit odd, given the fact that it's coming from the sky, but hey, they're giant rocks, I can see the logic. Gonna be using that in a lot of boss fights from here on, just because it's damaging as all hell. Also, for some reason, these faces act like the Pharaoh things in the Ice Pyramid, and that you actually have to stab them to open them up. I mean, that makes sense. If someone stabbed me in the face, I'd scream, but I could see that taking some time for some people to figure out in their first playthroughs. I know I did. Notable, whenever you see a vine on top of a little square of nothing like that, those are sections you can fall down to the previous floor through if you climb through the vine. And that, you actually do need to do that at some point, but at this point, it's more or less just traps to get you into some enemy encounters or minor puzzle-solving stuff. Nothing too dire. Though they just love throwing leeches at me. Actually, in a way, that also kind of reminds me. There's a great Deku Tree, given the fact that the guy's infested. Yeah, that's a bit overkill in the leeches there, game. I mean, they're easy enemies, but I can only just kill the same enemy so many more times, you know? Ah, well, at least you seem to be throwing me a new enemy. The Ooze. Power Rangers reference here. The Ooze has 750 HP, 540 experience points, 18 gold. Only really weak to bomb type attacks, but it can, I think, poison you and such. But the notable thing about it is that you do not want to use magic on it because there's a very high chance that it will reflect it, if not guaranteed. And that damage is going all right at you. I want to say it's one of the few, if not only, enemies in the game with that property to them, which is kind of strange, but hey, it's something interesting. I do have to wonder, because this is a game I do go back to every now and then, if I'll ever just give this game speedrun a shot, because I feel like just skipping as many enemies as I can while just using the battle mechanics, whatever they may be, to my advantage, seems like an interesting way to play. Especially because I think, all in all, between battlefields, leaving the game running between recordings and such, I think my endgame timer comes in at about 12 to 16 hours, somewhere in that range, which is longer than some playthroughs are. I know, I think my fastest at this point is probably like 7 hours in game, but I feel like that might be worth a try some of my time at some point. I'd be really bored if I had to do that, but you never know what might happen. Refreshers are probably the most useless item in the game, by the way, because I think they're supposed to cure debuffs, like your magic being lowered or your attack being lowered, which a few attacks, as I've gone over, can do, and I think that's what we've even shown up on screen. But those debuffs are so low in frequency and in effect that it's just not really worth using the refreshers. They kind of just exist for the sake of existing. Okay, this section can be a bit tricky if you're new. You have to let go of the wall by letting go of the A button, but the moment you leave the tile that the rock is on, press the A button again so you can catch yourself on the lower rock panels. And that'll allow us to come up here to progress through the area a bit further. I guess in a way, something I can give this game Dungeons credits for is that in the case you don't do the battlefields, they actually introduce enemies at a pretty good rate even within the dungeons. Because that was a pretty decent distance between the Ooze and the Scourger here. The Scourger has 750 HP, 513 experience points, 18 gold, weak to wind and shoot type attacks as well as I think the usual cure. I think they can confuse and put you to sleep. I think they also have an instant kill attack, but it's so low in frequency again that I don't entirely know. Instant kill attacks in this game are rare to say the least. They only really show up in the last third or fourth of the game, and beyond that, they're so low in success that a lot of the times my brain just forgets they exist. So does the rest of me, because my brain is controlling the rest of me. Because that's just biology. Also, Spirit of the Forest, you might want to get yourself checked out. You seem to have some fungi growing in you. Though I suppose if you're the Spirit of the Forest. That's completely fine, because mycelium are a part of the biodiversity, so, yeah. Mycelium. Why did I say mycelium? That's just that's like the equivalent of their roots, isn't it? Fungi. Mushrooms. Weird doohickey thingies. Thankfully, in the case for some reason your hands are hurting from doing all this axe chopping, in the case you for some reason decide to go after every mushroom for some reason in particular, you don't have to worry, because if I recall correctly, this is the last part of the game that has us use the axe's ability like this. Well, at least in this higher frequency. There's one more time I can think of where we need to use it, but it's so low in frequency that it's negligent at best. Negligible, not negligent. That implies that I forgot about it. No. I remembered it, but it's negligible. Trying to improve my grammar. Slowly but surely. An admitted issue with this game's dungeon, despite each of them having their own clear-cut gimmick, like this one having the pits you can fall down and the faces you have to stab, is that given the abilities that we have at our disposal through the weapons, there's admittedly only a few gimmicks they can really ever have. And even then, thinking about it, the main dungeons, with the exception of maybe the Ice Palace with the Magic Mirror, or the Ice Pyramid, all the main dungeons are pretty straightforward at this point. You just kind of go through it and find the end. I mean, I guess the Lava Dome tried to twist it up a little bit by having the switch you need to press. But even then, that's not much of an added gimmick. That's just more so an extra thing you need to do. Oh, you look unique. I guess you're the boss fight. Let's ignore you. If you can beat Ghidra, the monsters will disappear. Okay, fine. Boss fight for this area is Ghidra. 13,000 HP, 729 experience points, 18 gold, resistant to fire but weak to wind. Can paralyze you, I think. Counters with a poison ability from physical attacks, I believe. And it does have Quake as an attack, which can do some decent damage. The strategy we want to use here is use Aero as a party target. That's all you really need to do. Kaylee at this point, I believe, even has Aero, so yeah, you can get a lot of damage in. Meteor is also useful with Benjamin in particular, just because it's another set of charges that you can use, and since it's usually a lower amount, I usually go through them first, but hey, useful. I probably should cure Kaylee, but nah, I got this. Something I'm surprised the game doesn't do more often, though, given the fact that it's happened at least with the Ice Golem, is that there's not many party targeting attacks that bosses have access to. You got the occasional thing like Quake, yeah, but most of the time, bosses just attack one character at a time, and given the low amount of party members, that's still pretty notable, don't get me wrong, but it's just one of those things you notice the more you play a certain game, you know? It's kind of like how the more I play Final Fantasy X, the more I feel like it was a spin-off of Final Fantasy VII's mechanics in some ways. At least with the Materia versus Sphere Grid system. I'm grateful for you for beating those monsters. Allow me to carry you! And now we're on the tree, and if you look in the background, the trees are actually spelling out something for us. Go on, kid. Exclamation point, exclamation point. Okay. I have to admit, though, I do like this little set piece, though. It's cute. But that cute's up about all I can say about it, honestly. Well, that does bring us to the other side. Now we can just skip the Alive Force in general. And now there's Kaij Temple. There's not much purpose to this place, I have to admit. Captain Mac will tell you about the prophecy. Aside from that crest teleporter, which I believe just takes you elsewhere in the world, there's no purpose to this area without that old man dialogue. There's not even a chest in there, which is just weird. And here is pretty notable. Those are the last two battlefields in the game. But we'll be tackling those in a few minutes, because now it's time for us to explore Windia. Where's Norma? Have you seen her? No, but I can hear the obnoxiously loud wind. How about buying my Cupid locker for 300 gold? Sure. Not only is that just an upgraded locket, however, it also protects us from confusion, which is the most important status ailment to be protected from in the game. Because Benjamin, comparatively, I have to admit, this game does one thing right in that at the beginning, Benjamin feels really weak, but by the end, he is the more powerful character out of anything else. And having him get confused if you don't get that locket by endgame can be kind of devastating if he decides to use, like, Meteor on your party. Gotta admit, though, not a fan of Windia's music. It's the usual town theme, but it's a bit too relaxed. I like the more upbeat town themes. Not to say that relaxing town themes don't have a purpose. I'm looking at some of the ones in Final Fantasy VII in particular. Calm. Ironically named Calm. No, appropriately named Calm, not ironically. Ironically would mean that it was a very energetic city. Excuse me, are you Otto?
Later. My daughter Norma went to the tower up north using my Rainbow Road. But the powerful wind from Mount Gale broke the road-making machine. Norma's stuck down there until the winds died down.
Benjamin, let's keep on going. The crystal wind might be in that mountain.
Okay. Promise me you'll stop that wind.
Sure. Well, we have our next objective at least. Admittedly, though, in terms of the plot, Windia's effect doesn't seem as major. Like, Foresta, we were restoring the Earth. Aquaria, we were unfreezing the town. Fireburg, we were stopping earthquakes. The wind seems a bit lesser in comparison. Also, High Chocobo Sprite from Final Fantasy III, I think. Not to say heavy winds aren't dangerous. Oh no, they can definitely be dangerous. I have a particular memory of, I think I was like 5 or 6. We had some major winds up here for some reason in Massachusetts. I want to say maybe there was like a hurricane around the area or something, and we were getting the outward winds from it on the edge or something along those lines. And they weren't the kind of winds that could like push down an adult. They would be bothersome to one, but they wouldn't push one down. But for some reason, I decided to follow my dad out in those winds to grab the mail, and I got pushed down to the ground onto the staircase outside with such force that my knee was pretty badly scraped up. The Mobius crest is nearby. Huh. Well, at least we know where the third crest is. Can't get it yet, but it's there. Either way, now let's let's head on over and take down these last 2 battlefields. And the first encounter has for us the next new enemy, the Water Hag. 765 HP, 576 XP, 18 gold, weak to fire, resistant to water. They can cure themselves, which is kind of annoying, as well as I think they might counter physical attacks. I haven't really talked too much about counters throughout the game. I think I've talked about that before. But I just don't find a lot of counters that interesting unless they're status ones, and even then. Also, you may have noticed that enemy didn't have damage show up when I killed him. That's because the Scourgers aren't immune to Petrify. And if I attack with the Dragon Claw, as I talked about earlier when I got it, there's a chance the Petrify status ailment can happen from it. And if that happens, that's basically an instant kill. It's pretty nice. There are a lot of enemies in the game that aren't susceptible to it, but what you can get, right? And I think this last battlefield is all Desert Hags. I think an enemy from the next area can spawn in it technically, but I never saw it happen in this run. Oh, you pest. Admittedly, it's so minor, but self-healing enemies can always be just a little bit annoying because you have that little, really, moment. Though when bosses do it, that can be particularly annoying. I'm thinking of some of the ones in Paper Mario in particular. You know, I think I talked about something like this earlier about the battlefields, but I think this game honestly could have done with a second main battle theme anyway for like the second half of the game. And not that I would really fit the tone adjustment, because there is no real tone to adjust to, at least the tone that changed at this point. But just having a different battle theme to spice things up would have been interesting. Kind of like what the Tales of games do, like past a certain point where they change the battle theme just to keep things spiced up. Xenoblade and Xenoblade 2 did that too as well. Actually, did Xenoblade 2 do it? I honestly forget. I love that game's soundtrack, but when I'm not playing it, I can't remember it, if that makes sense, unless it's some of the more atmospheric town places for some reason, which is usually the opposite of how my brain works. Either way, welcome to Mount Gale. This is actually a fairly small area, only about the size of the mine or the falls basin, maybe somewhere in between. But it does have a good amount of pathways, though. There's not many enemies in the area in total, I have to admit. But it does have the next new one, the Vampire. 780 HP, 561 experience points, 18 gold. Weak to wind and shoot type attacks. I don't think they actually have any status ailments they can do against you from memory, though. Nothing too notable. Like the sprites, though. Mind you, that's most of the game. I like the sprites. Although I have to admit, I love the music here, and if I recall, this is actually a reused music track from earlier, just used particularly well. I might be wrong about that, though. Because the past week of recording this has been kind of scattered for me in the personal life due to some stuff at school. So, me not remembering what songs played when is personally understandable to me. Though, actually, no, the more I think about it, I think this is an exclusive theme. I think I'm thinking of something later on, actually. Happens. You gotta stop giving me refreshers, game. I want more seeds. And, you see, I would understand it if it was just bad luck. Like, say the chests were doing extent randomized, like it could be 3 refreshers or 3 seeds, or in other chests, 3 cure potions or 3 heal potions. But in this game, they're all set, so... Also, for some reason, they decided to throw a little bridge maze in here, even though it's not even really that much of a maze. It's more so just paths for paths' sake. But there is one thing important to get up here, and that's this next red chest, which contains, obviously, something important. The Apollo Helm, the best helmet in the game. Aside from just being more defensive than the previous 2, it also protects us from fire. That is kind of the weird thing they do with the armor in this game. I think I've talked about earlier. More often than not, the 3rd tier equipment is a combination of the first 2. Maybe a little more defense, but it usually combines the effects of the second one with the status protection with the defense of the first one with a little bit extra. So you're the one who's drained the Crystal Wind's power. That's Pazuzu. But you'll never meet him. That was oddly nonchalant. Either way, boss for this area is the Dullahan. 14,000 HP, 750 XP, 21 gold, resistant to fire, but not really weak to anything. Can put you to sleep, which is pretty annoying as well. This particular sprite of enemy, even if we see it later on, has an instant kill attack. But really, the strategy for this fight, Aero the partnering enemies just to get them out of the way, and then go all out. Meteor, physical attacks, Aero, whatever you got, just use it. Because at this point, the magic spell for Benjamin, or the stats for Benjamin, are raising at such a point where Meteor is probably going to be doing, as you can see with me, probably around 1,800 to 2,000 HP. So he doesn't really have much of a chance, though if you get put to sleep, that's obviously going to delay things a bit. Admittedly, I'll always laugh whenever I use a Meteor spell in any given Final Fantasy game, because the first time I ever saw a Meteor in anything in Final Fantasy related was not Final Fantasy IV, despite that being the first game in the series I really put a lot of time into. It was 7 when I was watching my brother play, and I always just laughed seeing people throw it around like it's nothing in these games, and then suddenly 7's like, oh god, it's the apocalypse. I always found the 3rd damage sprite for this boss really weird, by the way. I don't know why, but it just looks funky. However, the last sprite looks awesome. In fact, I kind of wish the enemy just looked like this in general, because the sprite's kind of unneeded. The horse sprite is just kind of unneeded for the design. I mean, yeah, it looks kind of cool because it's a headless horse. But, especially considering that's what the overworld sprite is, it's just kind of strange. I mean, I guess in a way, maybe the overworld sprites for enemies are based off what that enemy would look like from a distance, and obviously you would see more of a horse than a person from that kind of distance, but either way, he's down. And there's nothing really for us at this point. We've taken care of the winds, though, I guess. So we can use the exit spell, and let's head back to Windia. I did use the in off screen though, just because I wanted to get my spells back. Also, noble, since the wind's been taken care of, we can actually head up here. You can see forever. Cool. Yeah, the NPC dialogue is mostly different, but the only thing we need to see is Otto in here.
The wind has suddenly stopped. I'll try to make the Rainbow Road.
I guess that means it worked.
It worked.
Otto, we're going to save Normal and the crystal.
Wait. In the tower, you'll see switches on the even-numbered floors. Flick the switches with your axe. Then the elevator won't go past that floor.
Why is that important, you might ask? Well, you'll find out next time. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, we'll be heading on up to the next dungeon, Pazuzu's Tower. See you guys then.